Hello everybody, my name is Manu and welcome to another Eternal Contenders video series. Today I want to talk about a sweet deck that has been making some waves lately. The deck, I think, originally came from SirRhino. He built this deck for the mid-season major and I quite liked what he was doing there with the concept and like the way the deck plays out and stuff. I just didn't agree with like all of his deck building choices, and I think the deck could be built in like the strategy that he was going for could be built in like a better, more efficient way, I think. So I started like working on the archetype myself, and by now I came up with like a list that I'm pretty confident in and happy with. I have played like more than 150 games, I think, by now with the deck, mostly on stream for anyone that caught that and also got some of the evolution. And yeah, today I want to share that version with you and explain why it looks exactly the way it looks and where I like disagree on some of the things that I saw SirRhino do with the deck. Also, I dubbed the deck not quite Delver since the deck plays a lot like a Delver type deck in Magic does, for anyone that is playing Magic and knows that. So yeah, I thought it's just kind of like a fun and also like kind of fitting and descriptive name to better understand the deck. So yeah, let's talk quickly about like what the deck is and how it plays out before diving into the card choices. So the big thing here is, and the important thing to understand is, this is not an actual aggro deck. I have heard people multiple times refer to this as Feln aggro. That's not correct. If you approach this deck as a typical aggro deck, it's gonna underperform and you're gonna like not play the deck correctly and optimally. What this deck is kind of one of the more like specialized and fringe archetypes that would probably be described as like a tempo deck, or some would also like call it an aggro control deck, which is not quite correct because there's a bit of a misconception of like tempo decks being considered aggro control decks while they are not quite the same. So in a sense this is an aggressive deck, but it's not like your typical aggro deck. It's much like lighter on high power units, especially like heavy hitting units, and more focused on cheap, efficient removal and disruption answers to what the opponent is doing. And basically cares a little less about just like flooding the board with many units fast and beating down the opponent. It rather like slowly develops a board, in this case of a lot of evasive units with flying, while protecting that board with disruption and slowing down the opponent and keeping the opponent from blocking with cheap and efficient removal to generate said tempo and basically build an advantage in terms of tempo and also in terms of board that way, and then kind of ride it to victory by protecting it further with said disruptive cards and removal cards. So the deck definitely goes a little longer than your typical aggro deck and also is a lot more flexible, adaptive and interactive than the typical aggro deck is. And yeah, so let's dive into the cards and give you a better idea of what is going on here. Like for example, as you can see, unlike your typical aggro deck, this deck only has 4 actual 1-drops in Blood Beetle, and this deck is a lot better at making Blood Beetle work than your typical aggressive deck, simply because this deck is like less focused on curving out with units, so this deck doesn't mind to play like a Blood Beetle on turn 1 and then set it up with a removal on turn 2 to trigger the infiltrate, because it doesn't have to like curve out that aggressively and fast. It cares more about getting this cheap, efficient, evasive beater for 1 that it can later on like protect and slow the opponent down while the Blood Beetle is chipping away for 2 a turn on the opponent, slowly like whittling them down together with some other evasion units. There's also Twilight Raptor, which occasionally is a 1-drop if you happen to have Seed of Cunning and the Sigil in your opening hand as well, which is really nice if that happens, but if not, it's fine. It's something that you can play on turn 2 alongside, say, a Permafrost, a Sabotage, or another Blood Beetle, for example, or even like another Twilight Raptor. It's just another like tempo efficient unit basically. It's a 2-power flyer that's kind of hard to block, especially if you have ways to deal with the opposing flyers and titans, since there's not that many flyers in constructed. So flying is a pretty valuable ability if you can control the opponent's flyers and titans, because then you, even though this unit is pretty small, it can be a reliable attacker deep into the game, which is very important for a deck like this, unlike the typical aggressive 1-drops that are like Pyronite and Oni Ronin stuff that have no evasion and are like good early game cards, but scale kind of poorly into the late game, aside from Pyronite eventually becoming relevant again with his ultimate. And then we have Argenport Instigator. I mean, doesn't need too much explanation. It's just a very powerful 2-drop. It's good at blocking, it's good at attacking. It has great synergy with the Beastcaller's Amulet in the deck, making it trigger even without actually getting combat damage on the opponent. Like, if they jump block Instigator, you still get the beast from the trigger, and you can even just slap it on here and then kill something with a removal and get the beast later in the game, for example, when you can't get in for combat damage, for example. The other 2-drop, the other like more or less aggressive 2-drop in the deck of choice is Lethrai Ranger. It's another unit that needs a lot more support than the typical aggro unit, but is kind of worth the work once you get the payoff, because then you suddenly have a 2-power 4/4, another very tempo efficient unit. It's like overstated, undercasted, but makes you work for it, which is fine in a deck that kind of wants to play cheap, efficient removal and disruption anyway. So it's very much in line with this strategy, and also a great threat to then protect from there on out and keep hitting the opponent till they die. Like, this deck works a lot more on like protecting a few efficient threats and making sure they can keep hitting the opponent, rather than the typical aggro decks that just kind of put a bunch of good units out there, curve out, and just keep attacking till the opponent dies, and have maybe a bit of removal and combat tricks and maybe burn spells to finish off the game, but don't interact that much with the opponent's game plan. While this deck is a lot more caring about also like disrupting and crippling the opponent's game plan at the same time. And the last 2-drop is a really sweet one and a great idea by Rhino. Like, this card is kind of underplayed and underrated, sort of, I think, in the game right now. I mean, anyone that played Magic the Gathering knows how good a card like Merfolk Looter can be, especially in decks like this, because this deck has a bunch of removal that can be situational and might even be in a situation where the opponent doesn't have any units, or in a matchup where the opponent doesn't have any units. Same goes for like the occasional situational rapid shot, or cards like Sabotage or Backlash in the wrong matchups, or simply excess power. So it's really great to have a way to kind of cycle those away into more relevant cards, and also prevents the deck from flooding out, while at the same time being an evasive attacker, so it at least hits the opponent for 1 a turn. It also lets you slap Beastcaller's Amulet on it turn 3 to enable that. And yeah, it gives the deck a lot more flexibility and also sustainability in terms of like cycling away excess power. It's really nice in a deck like this. I mean, obviously it doesn't really work in a dedicated aggro deck, because a 1/2 flyer for 2 is not a particularly strong aggressive unit, and it also doesn't work in a control deck, because a control deck doesn't really care about what it does. Like, it needs its power to hit its high amounts of power. It also doesn't really care about a 1/2 for 2, and also doesn't want to attack with its units a lot of the time and stuff like that. So this type of like tempo-y, aggro control-ish deck is the perfect home for this card, and the card can work like a lot of powerful wonders in this deck. I've been really impressed, and I would even not mind playing 4 if I could fit the 4s, but I can't really find the room for it. So this is great stuff. Arguably you can count this as a unit as well. This it's just, yeah, like another tempo efficient card, getting like a 5/5 for 3 and also like an extra attack on one of our flyers is pretty great. It's a bit situational and you have to be careful when and how to use it, but all in all, this is another really like tempo efficient card, and like as I said, that's kind of the theme of the deck, getting the best threats for the least power, and then like being able to do other things at the same time to pull ahead on tempo and board further, and yeah, kind of raise the opponent in the air, while stuff like the Direwood Beast and Instigator potentially hold the ground and stuff like that. Then we have 3 Cabal Countess. That card is really nice, like it plays well with cards like Backlash and Annihilate, for example. Lets you pass, see what the opponent's doing, and depending on what they do, you either react to them or just drop a Cabal Countess end of turn. The deck's also pretty good at protecting her between like Rapid Shot and the cheap removal, and also like Sabotage and Backlash, making sure that the opponent doesn't have cheap efficient ways to get rid of her. And then a 6/1 quick draw can be as powerful or more powerful than some of the flyers in the deck. And it's also a really powerful threat against the more controlling decks. And last but not least, since the curve for a deck like this, since it wants to be tempo efficient and wants to do multiple things in a turn, ends at Midnight Gale. Some people might expect Impending Doom, or might even have tried or put Impending Doom into this deck, which I would not advise. Midnight Gale is great. Like, first of all, cards like Sabotage help you set up a Midnight Gale on turn 3 while making sure that it doesn't die right away to like a Torch or Vanquish, for example. And once it infiltrated the first time and has lifesteal, it's one monster of a race winner. Like, this deck is so good at just dropping a Midnight Gale, activating the lifesteal, and then winning the race off of the back of this, while protecting her with like protecting it with like Rapid Shot and more removal and some blockers, so that it's really hard for a lot of decks to actually like win against like an active Midnight Gale. And the deck is also reasonably good at keeping Midnight Gale active with cards like Backlash and Sabotage and so on. So yeah, this card has been really impressive and is very, very important to the deck. And that brings us to the spells. So first off, we have Permafrost. This is arguably the cheapest and most efficient removal that hits almost anything that isn't Champion of Glory and Sandstorm Titan, which is why it's nice, and because this is a deck that kind of ends the game in the mid game usually and doesn't go that long, makes the downside of it being vulnerable to endurance givers and silences a lot less of a problem. It just matters that you can shut something down for a couple of turns for a mere 1 power while doing other stuff, which is really great in the first couple turns. Rapid Shot fulfills a bit of a similar role, synergizes worse with Infiltrate, but is a bit more flexible, can also just finish off opponents, can enable some bad traits on defense, and yeah, is like a removal that basically isn't dead in a lot of situations, because you can just attack into one of their guys and use Rapid Shot to kill it while missing out on damage, but it's better than having too many removal spells in your deck that are dead when your opponent doesn't have a unit or plays barely any units in a control deck. Next we have Annihilate. That's like the next most flexible and efficient removal spell. 2 power to kill anything with a single faction is a really good deal. The fact that it's a fast spell helps a lot in when and how to use it. Wait for like the most information gain before you use it, and also ways to blow out the opponent. And it's also really important for this deck to get rid of Sandstorm Titan, which is why there's 4 Annihilate. And there's a lot of other good targets outside of Storm Titan in the game right now. The card's just really well positioned. In terms of disruption, we have 4 Sabotage. SirRhino, for some reason, ran only 2, and I think in later versions potentially 0, which I think is completely wrong. The card is so cheap. 1 power is great. You can often go turn 2, like Twilight Raptor Sabotage, or like Permafrost Sabotage after a Beetle and stuff like that. And set up, for example, a turn 3 Midnight Gale safely while taking away the opponent's removal. Gives you a lot of information what your opponent is working with, which is important for like such a more like flexible adaptive deck like this, and also hits a lot more things than Backlash. Backlash is also still pretty good because it generates potentially more tempo on like more expensive cards, but the thing is you have to leave 2 power open, which is a lot, and especially in a deck like this that wants to efficiently use its power every turn as much as it can. So it really is like a lot more situational than Sabotage, also in the way that it only hits spells, but Sabotage also can get Permafrosts, Obelisks, Relic Weapons and stuff like that, which is a pretty big upside. So I wouldn't advise running more than 2 or 3 of those. Like I cut the 3rd to fit the 3rd Whispering Wind currently. 3 has been playing reasonably well, but I cannot advise playing 4 like SirRhino and even less Sabotage. Like I think the deck definitely wants to max out on Sabotage first and then add 2 or 3 Backlash as additional support, and in a tournament I would have the remaining Backlashes in the sideboard because there is matchups where they are great, but I think they vary too much in their quality in order to run for a main deck, and they're also like too clunky for the deck. Leaving 2 power open takes a while till you can start doing that. And it's much worse at setting up and protecting our early game. Alright, and the last card that's kind of part of the power base is Vara's Favor. So Rhino for some reason didn't run them either, and I think they are kind of perfect for the deck. First of all, deck usually plays in like a adaptive, slower way that it doesn't mind using Vara's Favor on like an opposing unit instead of deploying a unit yourself, even though there is a lot of 2-drops in the deck, for example. Also it has great synergy with Whispering Wind. You can ping something and then cycle the power with Whispering Wind, giving you like a hard 2-for-1 that gives you like 2 business cards basically. And it kills a lot of the units that block the infiltrate units early on and prevent them from infiltrating, which is great, and gives the deck just like a lot more virtual removal. It lets you kill Auric Runehammer. The card has just been amazing for me. It's like, as I have said many times, probably the best shadow card in the game, and I think it fits perfectly in the deck and the strategy and should definitely be run. Yeah, I think that covers all the non-power cards, and last we basically have the power base, 25 power, 2 Cobalt Monument, a bit less Primal power because the deck is heavier on Shadow. I had 3 for a while. They felt a bit clunky also because not only do they enter the game depleted, but in a lot of games I basically had 4 power in play and a Monument in hand, and I don't want to play the Monument as 5th power because I don't really needed the 5th power a lot of the time. So I basically was holding the Monument till I find like another power to turn the Monument into Storm Dancer, but in a lot of games that just like never happened or took way too long, so it would have arguably been better if it would have been just a regular Sigil in the first place, so that it in games where needed as power wouldn't stunt my growth by being depleted, and also helps with Seed of Cunning being not depleted when played and stuff like that. So that's why I cut it down to 2. It's still nice to sometimes have it. It's also nice to be able to cycle, say, a late game Beastcaller's Amulet into a Cobalt Monument once we have 5 power, because then if you discard it to Whispering Wind, you get a Storm Dancer for it, guaranteed, which is nice. So yeah, it just reduces the flood potential a lot more of a deck that stops at 3 but still wants at least like 28 power, because the deck operates optimally at like 4 to 5 power still, but can get by 3 to 4. So there's like a nice balance. Alright, that's it for the deck list. I hope you guys found found it informative, and it answered all the potential unclarities or questions regarding the deck. If there's still more you want to know, feel free to ask in the comments. Now I'm gonna take the deck into battle in Ranked at top 20 Masters to show it in action as usual. So stay tuned for the first half of the games in a moment. Thanks for watching.